Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Kalanati. Today I'm going to review Lifelode by Jo Walton. This is not one of Jo Walton's better known fantasy novels, but I think it is one that's really worth picking up if you can find a copy. This book was published about 10 years ago and I read the second edition published by Nesfa Press. Lifelode is a standalone fantasy novel. It is told from the perspective of Taveth, the housekeeper at Applecirk Manor. Taveth's lifelode is housekeeping, and she also has a small touch of yaya or magic. She can see past and future versions of other people, so in a way she can see the future, but really just the future's effect on a person. This is a very quiet and domestic tale that mainly focuses on the events leading up to a violent outbreak when Applecirk is attacked by a mercenary force manipulated by a goddess who is angry with Hanith, a former lord of Applecirk who's just recently returned to the area. It is very difficult for Hanith to explain what she did or prevented from happening that angered the goddess of marriage, but that act is bringing the goddess's anger down upon anyone who shelters Hanith. Hanith is a very prickly woman and no one really likes her, but the importance of her act against the goddess of marriage does slowly become clear, and I admired her for that act even if I did not respect her for the way she treated other people. The story is also rather about the polyamorous marriage that Taveth belongs to and that kind of grounds the social life of Applecirk, and how lovely it can be when people are left alone to marry who they want to and have children when they want to without gods and religious acolytes getting in the way. And when this peaceful situation, this peaceful marriage comes under attack, really nobody wins. So Taveth is married to Ronald, but she is also Farron's lover, Farron being the current lord of Applecirk. Farron is also married and his wife is also involved with Taveth's husband Ronald, and the various couples all have their children together, so they're basically one gigantic blended family. While they're not all strictly monogamous within their marriage, as it were, they do have rules. And part of how things unravel is that the goddess is able to get her fingers into the cracks created by people's little jealousies and insecurities within their relationships. I really loved how quiet the story was for the most part. Much of the tension came from how I loved the peaceful nature of these people's lives, and I was anxious that it was going to be upended in a way that might never be fixed, that it might never be able to go back to the way it once was. There are also some concepts in this that I thought were done very well. Life loads and yaya, as well as the time dilation built into the world building. So life loads are like one's calling in life, a very deep inner calling, that thing that really satisfies you. And yaya is the magic. And I thought that both of these things were quite complex, really feed into the story, but weren't info dumped. You really have to figure out some of it on your own because Walton is not info dumping all the explanations for you, and neither are the characters. And then there is, I'm gonna call it time dilation between the eastern and western reaches of this world, which I feel is kind of a flat world in a way. This idea really reminded me of Werner Vinge's Zones of Thought novels, and I knew that those books had influenced Walton, and that was confirmed actually in the interview at the back of this edition that I read. But there are, if you go in one direction, it seems that time runs differently, magic is easier and more powerful, you can think better and faster. So for example, Hanith leaves Applecirk in the marshes. She goes either east or west to the area where she can think better and faster. Her life load is yaya, which is her reason for going. She goes to the part of the world where you can practice magic, where yaya is more powerful and easier to do. So by her subjective time, she's gone for 15 years, but when she returns to Applecirk, she's been gone for 50 to 60 years, and a lot of of people don't even remember her because multiple generations have passed. And when she returns to the marshes, she immediately notices that she can't think as well. It's a lot harder for her to perform magic, and that's part of the reason why she doesn't really want to be in Applecirk. But I thought that that was a really interesting idea, and I've never seen it done quite like this before, not even in Vinji's books, which are science fiction. In the same vein of time, it feels like all of the story is happening at the same time. The past events, the present ones, the future events. It's all written in present tense. And the first time I tried to read this book, I bailed after the first chapter because I found the timelines, the tense, and all the characters to be a little bit too confusing, a little too overwhelming in the first chapter. My second attempt went much better and I was able to keep it straight, but it does take a couple chapters to really sink into the flow of how the story is being presented and what is in the past and being recollected and what is in the future and such. It is worth it to stick with it and figure it out, I think. But it is true, I think, that a lot of these events really are, subjectively speaking, kind of all happening at once, because that's kind of the way that a lot of the characters experience it, because of the way they experience time, or because of the way that they see other versions of people like Taveth does. So overall, this really is a very domestic fantasy novel. A lot of the scenes take place in the kitchens, in the fields, at the dinner table. I loved it for being self-contained. It is very much a standalone novel that's never going to get a sequel according to Walton, and I'm cheering for that. And it's very much content with being at home. Fantastic stories can happen to the housekeepers, the bread bakers, the village people, and not just the lords and ladies. And that is the perspective of this novel that I really enjoyed. That is it for my review of Lifelode by Jo Walton. Definitely let me know if you have read this book, or if you want to, leave me your comments down below. I'm very curious what people think about this book versus some of Walton's better known novels from recent years. Thank you so much for watching this review, and I'll be back to talk to you again soon, and until then, bye.